It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce George Lamm. We're here in your beautiful apartment in Jerusalem. And George, your family came from Brataslava.
My family came from Bratislava. My mother was born in Bratislava. My father was born in Vienna. My father's family, he was the oldest of 4 children. It was he, then he had a sister, and there were 2 brothers. And the family had a big material store, factory, or wholesale material business in Vienna. And eventually they opened up a branch in Bratislava. The distance between Vienna and Bratislava is about 50 minutes, an hour. So my father then used to go at the weekend, Monday morning till Friday, he went to Bratislava, where he managed the store in Bratislava, and that's where he met my mother, of course. That was in, that was obviously before the war. The family, my father's family was very well off. On the other hand, my mother's family was also very well off. They lived in Bratislava. My mother was the oldest of 3 sisters. She had 2 sisters. My mother was the oldest, and 2 came out, and 2 sisters after her. My grandfather was dealt in cows for milk. Really, he bought and sold cows, and he milked. He got the cows were for milking purposes, not for meat. And he had quite a big business in which his mother and his mother was involved. She was a very, very good business. She was at the time when she was taken by the Nazis. She was 86, but she was still working in the family business. And they lived a very good life there. They had servants and things. My grandmother, who by the way tonight is a yotze, but she was very religious. My grandfather was also religious, but less than my grandmother. My grandmother, not having any boys, she made not having any boys, so she wanted that should be a mezuzah and everything, in Shabbos and so forth, and there should be some divrei Torah. So she invited every Shabbos. She invited 2 or 3 yeshiva bocharim to be with them, and together with and they, of course, also gave divrei Torah and so forth, because my grandfather was a little less learned than she would have liked. So she was very strict. That was the model, and they lived a very good and simple, good life. They travelled a lot. My mother tells me that when they often went off to Italy, the whole family, and during the summer holidays and so forth. So it showed that they were well off and so forth. And that went on, obviously, till the war started till the outbreak of the war. Actually, just before the outbreak of the war, my father and mother got engaged, and they were meant to be married on the first week of September in '39. Of course, when the war broke out, there went the wedding reception and so they couldn't have a reception anymore, wedding reception or anything like that. So they got married in a school, somewhere in a classroom, with I don't know, 20 people, 30 people, whatever it was, very few people, and had a reception which was more like a kiddush than a wedding. And then they went off there to honeymoon. They didn't manage to get off somewhere, I don't know where, but they did. That they managed to do, because it was still very early in the war, in the time of the war, and the Nazis hadn't really started taking people and so forth, but they made life miserable right from the beginning. Uh, so that happened. That was that.
And George, the picture that you have, that's of
Now the picture that I have here, that's my. They are my paternal grandparents, my father's parents, and his youngest brother, who was I think 14 or 15 when the Nazis came, and they were taken and sent in 1944, almost towards about 6 months before the end of the war, something like that. They were taken and sent to Auschwitz, where unfortunately they perished. Now the other side of the family was my mother had, as I said before, another two sisters. One of the sisters, again the youngest sister, was not married. My father, my aunt was also married, was already married, but the youngest sister, my aunt, she was not married. There came an edict which said that all unmarried girls have to report to wherever they have to report to, and if they don't report, then their parents will suffer. So many of her girlfriends just went, ran away and hid, and some even got married fictitiously. They arranged a marriage, and they sort of said after the war, I think we'll get divorced, but just they should be married. My mother's sister refused. She didn't want to do that. She didn't, although she had offers that people said, "Come, we'll marry you, and till after when it's all over, we'll split." No, she didn't want to do that. So they said, "Well, at least go and run away." That she also didn't want to do that because she said she didn't want her parents to be hurt. She was scared that if she goes away, her parents would suffer. So she didn't. And the story goes that my grandfather had some connections apparently, and he managed to get a waiver for her. And he got it. Now, first of all, he took her to the train station. I think they went by train. He took her to the train station and let her go there. And then he went back, and he apparently when he got back, or at some time or other, he got the waiver in his hand, which hadn't come beforehand, and he raced back to the train station to get her, but too late, he saw the train just going off. So that was no good. And she, of course, I believe, then she died eventually of tuberculosis, I was told, and she was shot by she just fell down, and they set the dogs upon her, and that was the end of that.
Do you know where she was taken to?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was in Auschwitz, it was Auschwitz or Ravensbrück. I think it was in one of those two. I must ask my brother, he probably would know, but he wrote all this, he would know. Or it could have been Auschwitz, anyway. Probably, yeah. So that would have been Auschwitz, Birkenau. So, if I remember, he wrote about it. So that was her thing, and my father. Now, I was then born in 1941, and in 1941 things were okay, meaning that the Germans were there, and you had laws. You weren't allowed to, Jews weren't allowed to do this, do that. Jews had to wear a star, and Jews weren't allowed to own businesses. All these things were put into practice, but they were more or less left alone, aside from all these things that made their life miserable. And of course, they were being beaten up in the streets and so on. And we lived in a house together with mostly all the family at the beginning, because at the beginning at the beginning of the war, we lived with a family with my parents, my grandfather, my grandmother, my grandmother passed away in 42 from breast cancer. So she's still buried in, she's buried in Brataslava. Her grave exists.
In Pressburg?
In Pressburg. Her grave exists. The cemetery is there. Her grave is, she exists. And the rest of us, as I said, my mother's family lived also together with the two grandmothers, with the mother of my grandmother and the mother of my father. They were both widows at that time. Their husbands had died long before the war, and they lived together with the people in one house. And then we lived there. It was in that one building, I think. And in another apartment next door, there was my aunt, my mother's sister, younger sister, the second one. She was a year younger than my mother, who married, and also married quickly because my grandmother normally was she was very religious, as I said before, and she would not have, under normal circumstances, let her marry my uncle, because he wasn't by any means up to standards, up to her standard. But because of the war and thing, they married, and she got married, so they lived there. And the same with my father. In fact, my father was brought up from the Aguda. My father was the Aguda. I forgot to mention that my grandfather, the Lambs, were from Aguda. They were Agudas. Okay? And my father also came from that upbringing. He was brought up as they were very Orthodox also. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, liked him very much because he was a Yodea Sefer, if not a Talmud Chochem. But I think he was a Talmud Chochem, but he would say that he was a Yodea Sefer. He wouldn't say it was Talmud Chochem. And she liked him, but she had one problem. That my father, at some stage of the game, heard Jabotinsky speaking. And apparently Jabotinsky completely got him. He was completely mesmerized by him, and he became a revisionist. And for my mother and my grandmother to have a revisionist, the Zionist, that was unheard of. So she wasn't terribly...
Where did he still remain from?
He remained from, of course. He remained from... He was still in the Aguda. In fact, there were many Aguda boys who were revisionists. Beitar was more or less almost a religious movement with kids from the Aguda who went with him. And my father became a Rosh Beitar and things, religious all the time. And also his brother also became that way. So my grandmother wasn't too happy, but because of the circumstances and what was happening, he was fine. It was just that one thing that wasn't very good. But okay, she agreed, and they married. And I was born, as I said, in 41. They were married in 39. At the beginning of the war, I was born in 41. At the beginning, we lived with the family in the house. And then when the 41, beginning of 42, Nazis started with, you got to move out, or even before, you got to move out of your house. And they started pushing families, 4 or 5 families into one apartment in the Jewish quarter. And we had to leave our apartments and go to where they took us, and we had, as I said, about sometimes like four families living in a 3-bedroom apartment or 4-bedroom apartment. Because they said Jews don't need so much room. And then they started in 42, later on they started the first evacuations. And there it started. That's when we started going on the run. My mother took me in her and was most of the time outside walking with me. She was very good. She had a very Aryan
appearance.
Appearance, that's the word. She had a very good Aryan appearance. She was pretty much unmolested most of the time, and she never wore she wouldn't wear the star. She was very much of and she excited, except for once or twice I think she was caught, but generally she wouldn't. And we kept on the run, together with my father, and we were outside one day. I don't know where my father was, or maybe all of us were outside. My memory of exact dates and things I don't have anymore. I just know things that happened. We were outside, and someone came running to tell us don't go home because they're going through all these buildings now and taking people out. And so my mother quickly turned around and went. And at that time, of course, they came to our place, and my grandmothers were there, so they took my grandmothers, both of them, great-grandmothers, my great-grandmothers, both of them, and they, of course, went off to Auschwitz, and they were never seen again. And we ran away somewhere.
And can I just ask you, the person that warned, was it a non-Jew that warned?
No, as far as I told, it was one of my mother's cousins who also was running around somewhere, but he had just come from where, or he'd seen, he must have also been outside, he had seen that what was going on, and he knew my mother was out somewhere, so he ran and told my parents, and he went off and we went off.
That's
why we weren't at home when they came and took people. From then on we had to be on the run. My grandfather also was with us, my mother's father, but he went off somewhere else. I don't think he was with us all the time, but he went off. He comes into the picture later on. Anyway, we went off, and we were we hid in a cemetery, and the next morning it's also one of the times. By the way, when they took everybody out of our house and so forth, the next day we came back, because it was known that once they'd been there, they won't come back that quickly. So we came back, and my parents must have taken whatever they needed, or they had money or whatever it was, and they must have had connections somewhere, because all through the war, my mother said they never had any lack of money. Money was, and they had to have money for bribes and things you needed. You couldn't. And she said, because I said, how did you do it? They always had. So that was the answer. I don't know exactly how they did it, but they did it. And as I said, we kept on running. One situation was that we were in that was like the beginning, slept in a cemetery one night. Woke up very early, of course, and we seemed to leave before anybody came and saw us. And I started crying that I wanted a drink, or I wanted chocolate, and I started screaming. I was must have been about 3 years old, 2, 3 years old at the time. And they didn't know what to do, so my father took me, I think it took me on his shoulders with my mother, and they walked off somewhere, and they saw a milk bar. And this was about 6:30, 7 in the morning. And there was a milk bar apparently where the person, the Balabait, lived, not just a shop by itself and everything. I started knocking on the door, and the guy came down and he said, what are you doing at 7 o'clock, whatever it is? I'm not open. So my father said, please, we have to go. Like the kids screaming, and the neighbours can't take it anymore. We gave him a story, and okay, finally he opened the door and he let us in, and they bought me a drink, whatever, and sat down. But he apparently must have at some stage got a bit suspicious, and he decided something's not right, so he called the police. The police came. It was the Slovakian police. They ordered my father. They interrogated him. My father was very good. He knew what to say. He spoke Hungarian, Slovakian, Czech, whatever you want, and he was very good. He gave a very good impression, and he was very, very good, because I said before that Jews weren't allowed to have businesses, and they had to be given up. But what they did, the Nazis, they took a non-Jew to take over the business, but the non-Jew kept the owner, the Jewish owner, on, at least for some time, in order to learn the business. It was called Aristator or something. I forgot the name exactly. Arizator, yeah. And this was called the Arizator. Now the Arizator that took off my parents' business was apparently, he had a good relationship with my father. So when the police called Dad said, go and call him, look, this is my business, I work there and so forth, and here's the number, call him and he'll vouch for me, which he did. The guy apparently did vouch for him, which was very nice, and I was lucky that my father, because not many Aristotles were like that, they kept the Jews there for, I don't know, a month, 2 months, they know everything, and then they sent them off to Auschwitz, or kicked them out, whatever it was, got them there. But he was very good with them, and he said, yeah, he's working for me, and he's still there, which we didn't, which he wasn't anymore, of course, but that was okay. But the one of the sort of, you can say it was a miracle, a nest, was that my father always carried with him his talis and tefillin, always, and he had it in his bag, and the bag was just where you are, by the seat, and it was there by him, by his chair, and the policeman was over there interrogating him. Now, if the policeman would have just happened to look at the bag, which was open, he could have seen the tefillin, because Dad said there was a bit of, thank God he didn't. So that was that. It was one of those.
Really,
that was one of those things. And from there we are not from there, but we also were at a hidden by Goyim for a good few months by an elderly couple, very old peasants who had a 2-story house, and we were upstairs. Again, money, of course, for money. We weren't allowed to, I wasn't allowed to say moo or boo, because nobody knew that someone was living upstairs. And if people came in to them and heard the flushing of the toilet or God knows what, or a kid making noise, that would be the end of that. So I was always kept very quiet and thing.
Do you have any recollections of these?
What I'm telling you now is a recollection. This particular thing is the recollection, and the what I told you a moment ago is also a recollection.
With the mob?
With the police and the getting a drink. That I got a sort of basic recollection. And this I've got a recollection of, and there's one other recollection I've got, but that's about all. The rest I told, although my father never spoke about it, and my mother spoke more. My father didn't want to speak. He spoke generally sometimes on Shabbos, but then we couldn't do anything. We couldn't record, or we couldn't write. So no, but he generally didn't speak. So. That was the thing. So there was one stage when we were at this place, that it was snowing, which it often does a lot during winter. And I went to the window, and I saw kids playing out there, and I had my hands on the window thing. Within seconds, my father came and dragged me away. God forbid that anybody should have seen me there, and they would have. God knows what would have happened. And it was, why I say it, these memories, this was triggered. I had forgotten about all this. And in fact, when I was a child, or when I was in school, I don't remember talking about a Holocaust, and I don't remember having heard of it at home.
Your parents never spoke about it?
Not as much. They may have mentioned porn, and all the people and all their friends around them. I mean, I would have had to think, I never. Eventually, started hearing, and I heard from Max, and I heard from other friends of theirs, that I'd much later on, but as a school kid, when I was in high school also, towards the end of high school, I didn't know, but what triggered this off when I came to Israel, and one day I was at home, and I was looking out the window. No, I came out of a shower in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, so it was snowing in Jerusalem. And I came out of a shower, and just with a towel around me, because I just hadn't heard it. And I looked out the window, came into the room, I looked in the room, I saw kids playing. And it suddenly hit to me that they're playing. I can't go out now because I'm not dressed even, I can't go out to them. And somehow it gave me and brought me back to that thing that I'm there, kids, and I can't go out. And from that moment on, the Shoah that triggered it off, and I started thinking about the Shoah and so forth, which was until then, and that was that was already when I was in Australia. I was already working. I was a teacher, so I must have been in my 20s, almost 30s, in my 30s already, till that came. That's
it's incredible, and all the years.
All the years I don't remember. Maybe I did hear. Maybe I know that at home we never heard. Aside, my father used to speak a lot on Shabbos about the life before. Okay, he went to yeshiva in Nitra, and he came to tell us how his life was there, and how he came home twice a year, just Pesach and Rosh Hashanah, and the rest of the time every Shabbos he went off and was hosted by people. Like my grandmother had Bochurim, and he was there. So that he spoke about.
Did he ever mention Rabbi Weissmandel?
I don't know. I don't think so. Or maybe. I really don't know. I don't remember. But names, I'm not sure he mentioned. But he mentioned, in fact, that's where he wasn't yeshiva till about 18, till he came home and then helped with his parents in the business in Pressbook. So he sort of, so he was very much for people going to the yeshiva and not sitting, but for years, go for the amount of years and then go out and work, which he did. He came out, he did some course of, he started doing some studying and thing, but he had to stop because of the war. For accountancy, I think he wanted to do. He managed to do part of it, but then of course the war broke out, and that was the end of that. So that was the thing. And then why we had to leave this place. One day the woman came and told us, look, I can't anymore, because neighbours are getting suspicious. 2 people, and you're coming from the grocery, and with I don't know, say 4 pints of milk and the things. Just as I was saying, the
they got nervous.
why we had to leave, because she came and says, and people are getting suspicious. You're taking so much food. How come for 2 of you need so much food? So we moved on from there and ended up, I don't know when, again from there to where, to the next place. I don't remember where, but then I remember we were at a Swedish, this was very close, I must have been about 4 then, because by 3 and 4 I can remember more. I remember more things. We were at a Swedish, either it was a consulate or a institution, whatever it was, but it was somewhere that the Nazis or the Slovaks couldn't come in because of it. It's a diplomatic, must have been some sort of a consulate. I don't think it was exactly, but it was a place they were unable to come in. Okay. And what they did though, they knew there were Jews there, because we were there with about 10 people, 10 or 12, if not more. And I was the only child, because all my parents, friends and things were married very early, or much later than me, and I was a child. So I never I never had a childhood. I never went to kindergarten or prep school or wherever it was, and I never saw kids because I always had to be home. I was always shut up. There were times where they came in to some place where we were and checked for us, and to check for Jews. My father quickly grabbed my mother and we hid in a cupboard, and my father put his hand over my mouth and almost suffocated me.
You remember that?
That I was told. I don't quite remember that. I was told. And why? And my mother said, "What are you doing? You'll kill the child." So he said to her, "Look, we are young. We can still have children, and it's better that, unfortunately, he goes than they find us, and there were other people in the place. Then we endanger all the other people here. You know, they're not kill all of us this way." Anyway, thank God I'm here. In the last minute they left, I was already completely, my mother used to tell me that I was already completely blue in the face and thing, but we were okay.
George, can I just ask you, when you heard this, it must have been a major trauma to hear such a thing, because
it was.
It's not a.
Yeah,
it's such
I don't know
hard
if it's
decision.
trauma because I'm already. True, but by this time I heard it, I was already married, a father of kids and family. Already was, I guess, in a certain sense, but not to such a huge thing. And then going back to that consulate Swedish thing, we were there, and the place apparently was surrounded by police. They knew there were Jews there, but they couldn't come in. And then again, it was Hanukkah. And there was a few families there. And then one day they came, the woman, the man, the consul thing had nothing to do with us. He didn't even want to know that we were there. It was the woman and she was very good, and she used to take me out into the garden, played with me a bit. That was, at least I got some sort of fresh air. And then one day she came and said, "Look, we're leaving. We're closing the place down, we're leaving." Don't know what it was, why. So you should know, we were leaving tomorrow morning, and that's it. So I'm sorry, but that's how it is. So my father then said, "Okay, that's it. We're leaving now, midnight or whatever it was. We're not going to wait till in the morning that they go, and then they'll come in and take us, and we'll go." And he says, "Whatever will happen, will happen." And so, and he lit Hanukkah Licht, I don't know what day it was. And midnight or something like that, we walked out. There wasn't a soul outside. We went out. My mother calls that the Hanukkah Nes. Called it
another miracle.
That thing. So that was that. And we carried on moving from place to place. Eventually, towards the end, my father was caught about six weeks to 2 months before the war ended, and he was sent to Theresienstadt. He was caught because we were downstairs, wherever we were, and he was still upstairs, and he was doubly late filming, and he stood in such a way that his shadow could be seen. So people saw the shadow, and they raced in, barged in and tried to get him. He ran, but in the end he came to a sort of dead end, and they caught him, and they sent, and he was pretty strong and he could go, but they caught him, and he was sent off to Theresienstadt. We didn't know where he was, and that's when we also came and connected again with my grandfather, who was somewhere else. And at that time things were pretty bad, and I don't know where my mother and we hid together with my grandfather at some place, and then this place we had to leave again, and then my grandfather had a connection with the conductor, a tram conductor who was very good friends with him, and the tram conductor said to him, "Look, what did he say to him? Oh yeah, he said, "If you ever need me, call me." Okay, so this time my grandfather called him, and the conductor said, "Look, no problem, I can take you." okay, but I can't take the child. I haven't got room. I can take you and your daughter, but I can't take the child. So what do? My mother's sister and her husband and they were out in the country somewhere, hiding. She was where were they? They were on a farm somewhere, and she was posing as a Christian, as a Catholic with a big cross on her. And there were other goyim there who were just trying to get away from all the bombardment and so forth. And a person took me there. Who was it? Yeah, we had a maid who used to work for my grandparents, and she remained loyal to us. And she was a connection between my mother and her sister. She took me to my aunt out in the country in a bunker somewhere, and my mother went off with my grandfather to this conductor, and my father was in Theresienstadt, and that's where we were at the end of the war. The Russians liberated us, my aunt and uncle and me. The Russians liberated us from where we were. By the way, also, when we got to this bunker and the goyim started saying, what are you doing here? So she said, that's my sister's son, and she's sending him here because she wants him to get away from the bombardments and so forth, which was fine. But they just had to be very careful with me that I don't pull my pants down.
Do you remember the name of the maid? Do you remember the name of the maid?
Of the maid? I think she was called Anna.
And did she ever receive Hasidam Watala?
I don't know. I don't know what happened to her. I don't know if I have no idea, because I never heard of her after the war. And then again, I'm not sure if she did it for money or not. That's the only thing. I know she did it. I know she was loyal to the family from that, but I'm not. I would imagine they gave her money also. But Anna, she was called, I don't remember. And so we were there, then we went, after the wedding, we went back to the family house, so to speak, and waited for whoever to come, who came back and who didn't come back.
How long were you separated from your mum?
That must have been about he went for 2 months. I'd say more or less the time that, from the time till the end of the war, also around about 6 weeks, I would imagine, something like that. From the time I took my father was 2 months away. From that time, I was sent to my aunt, so it was around about that time.
And George, do you remember seeing your mum again?
I remember seeing
the reunion when you saw your mum after the 2 months?
No, that I have no recollection of. Somehow I don't remember. I took a thing of. I came there with all the family, and that's, I don't recollect the Dafka that.
And your house still, was it still, you could
it
go
was
back
still
to
there.
house?
We could go back there. We went back there because I think whoever was there ran away at the time. But we went back there and waited for my father. We didn't know where my father was, what was with my father. And he came after a few weeks. A few weeks later, don't know how many, quite a few weeks later, he turned up. He had, they were also liberated from thing. In the last minute, somebody else told me, he didn't like to talk about it, but in the last minute they just packed the inmates onto our buses, took them across the bridge, and someone shot them. And I think somebody told me that my father was being pushed into the thing, and there was no room in the bus or truck, whatever it was. They threw him aside, to get him for the next time. Of course, next time he wasn't there, obviously. He had managed with all the balagan and thing to get out of the place. This was almost 2 years when the Russians, whoever were about 500, were about 10, 15 minutes away or something. They were very close already there, so they quickly, maybe it was more, but they quickly tried to get rid of them, and then they went.
And do you remember seeing your father again?
When my father?
Yeah.
When he arrived, I remember vaguely that he arrived and there was a big to-do. But again, I was 5 years old.
Yeah,
6 years old, I didn't, these things didn't really get to me. I didn't really know what was happening bichlal, as that goes. And then that was the end of the war. Then we went back to live wherever we lived. My father kashered the whole place all over again and started eating kosher, which we didn't eat during the war, and he did eat. He refused to eat anything non-kosher, but he said, you have to, because to my mother, you and the child, you have to eat for the child.
George, do you remember being hungry during the war?
No, I don't remember nothing. No, that's the whole thing. I don't remember I never had any sort of, no. I didn't know what was, all I remember is I had no childhood, no children to play with. I never had any children and so forth. And there were lots of things. My mother was she was an actor. She was fantastic. I'm not a real actor, but she could act. She was better than any actor here. And she acted out scenes that saved our lives, many times. Okay, I'll give you one example where apparently we were hiding in some place, and all of a sudden they heard that the police or the Nazis are coming upstairs looking for Jews. My mother immediately went out the staircase, she grabbed a pail, she put a schmutter around her hair, and she got a pail and started cleaning the stairs. The people came upstairs, halfway up, and then they saw her. She was obviously this washerwoman. But they asked her, are there any Jews here? And my mother said, Jews? And she started swearing and cursing the Jews, and then no idea until they said, okay, and they went off. And that was on the spot of the moment that and that's how she said. And that was only one of the occasions where she used her talent of acting to be able to. She could have been an actress if she wanted to be.
But George, in Brataslava, the percentage of Jews that survived is very, very low.
That one.
Extremely low.
But almost everybody. I went back to Bratislava when? The first time, just after the Iron Curtain rose, and even before. I went back with my mother and my brother for a surgery, and we went there, and that was in 86, 7, something like that. And I remember seeing that there wasn't a Jewish person, of the few that were left there, there wasn't one Jewish person who had a Jewish grandchild. There was nobody native there. There was no Jews. Who could you marry? You can only. And my mother had one cousin who, b'mikra, married Jewish, because they were both doctors, they met at university. But not because they were Jews, they just happened to meet. And it happened that they were Jewish. But otherwise, nothing.
And it was once such a thriving Jewish community.
It was a thriving Jewish community. It was the Chassam Sofer, the yeshiva, Pressburg yeshiva. It was a big thing, all gone. Yeah, you've got Chabad there and thing, but it's also very few. And from there we went to, after a year and a half being in Czechoslovakia, and I went to school there for the first grade. First time I ever met kids, and I was in a.
Was it difficult to be together with other children?
For me, it was. I didn't know what that. I remember. I didn't know what it was all about, and I screamed, "I don't want to go." And my father literally had to drag me to school.
And what language do you speak at home?
At home, we spoke German.
And at school?
Because the school Slovakian. The Jews, the most of them in Pressburg spoke German. And I spoke German, because that was what we spoke at home. Hungarian, because we speak that at home too, mainly because of the great-grandmothers, they spoke Hebrew. Hungarian. and Slovakian at school.
And could you speak Slovakian?
At school, apparently. 1 year at school, but after that, no, I don't remember one word in Slovakian. Hungarian I spoke. I got to Australia with German and Hungarian. And Slovakian, probably also Slovakian, but I never spoke it. And I don't remember. I spoke Hungarian a little bit in Australia until such a time that there was nobody to speak to, and it's sort of at the beginning I remember my parents spoke in Hungarian together with my aunt, and I used to translate for my cousins what they're saying. But after a while they stopped talking in Hungarian to us, and I forgot my Hungarian. I still remember sentences and words and things, but in general I forgot. And I spoke and continued speaking I learned English and continued speaking in German at home. And when I came to Israel, I met all my relatives, I spoke to them in German. So till today I can speak German. I can speak and I can understand more or less.
And George, can I just ask, when you went to school, did you manage to make friends eventually? Or
where? In
Slovakia? In Bratislava?
In Bratislava, I don't remember because I was there only for a year. One kidal. I was there with a friend, a girlfriend, not a girlfriend, a girlfriend of ours who also went to Australia with us in the end.
She was Jewish?
And she was Jewish, and we were the only two Jewish kids in the thing. And what I remember is we were given permission not to write on Shabbos because we were, school was on Shabbos at that time. So that I remember, we were different. So therefore I don't think that we had any interaction as such with the Slovaks, the Goyim. And after a year I went, and they were my friends when I came to Australia. And the year after I came to Australia, a Jewish school started at Mount Scopus. My parents put me into there.
And how did you get to Australia?
To Australia, it's also a story actually. My father very much wanted to come to Israel. And in fact, there was one stage where, my mother would have been prepared to also, there was one stage when my grandparents weren't happy when my father became a revisionist, as you can see, and so on. But at one stage during the war, my grandparents said to my father, "You were right, my child, you were right," and sort of accepted the fact he was there. But he had also the Aguda and all these movements gave out were given certificates to come to Israel, and they were given, because they were Aguda, they were given one, a certificate. And then my grandfather said to my father, that's stage towards the end, he had these certificates. He said, "Look, you were right. We can't go anymore." I don't know why he said we can't go, but we're not going. Take the certificates and you go. And my father wouldn't go. First of all, didn't want to go because he didn't want to leave them. But he took the certificates, and I think he did try to go, but he was pushed back because they wouldn't accept him because he was a revisionist. And they wouldn't take revisionists. So the papers that he had from his parents weren't good enough for him because they wouldn't. Mapai, the Sochnut at the time, wouldn't take revisionists. They would have taken from Aguda, but not from. So he didn't go to Australia. But also, I don't think they tried that much after that because he really did not want to leave his parents. But after his parents, unfortunately, perished, then he says where to go. So he must have tried again to come to Israel, but he was knocked back because of being a revisionist. And then he found out he had a sister and a brother. Now his sister married a Hungarian in 1937 or something like that. And she used to come to Vienna in 1938, and she saw what was happening. And she and her husband decided they're leaving Europe As far as they want to go, as far away as they can. And they went to Australia. They ended up in Australia. My uncle, who was a younger brother, who was not married, my grandparents had managed to send him off to England, where my grandmother's sister was, and he came to England in 39, beginning at 38, 39, before the war started. Once the war started, he was declared an enemy alien. What did they do? They got just the men. They got them all, put them on a ship and sent them off to Australia, like the convict days. Yeah. And he got onto he was put on one of these ships. He ended up in Australia. Eventually, he found his sister. Not right away, because he didn't know where he was. He gave a note to some soldier. He weren't allowed to speak to him even, because they were very worried that these people were spies and Nazi spies. But after 2 years, they realised they weren't. So they told them, look, you can go. If you wanted to join the army, you can go. You can leave. So he joined the army, and of course they didn't put him in the front. Joined the army, meaning being in the home front. So he was taken to some base where he loaded ammunition or unloaded things, and that was his thing. And there he met my aunt, his wife, because the Jewish community there took care of him. They were the European Jews, they're not the English. He came. So my father heard that they were both there, so he says, we're going to Australia. So they sponsored. They sponsored my uncle, the one from who was married before, married already. He sponsored it, and so that's how we got to Australia.
That's a picture of.
Now that's the one. That one is the one that went to England, and was he was as a child he went to England, and he was declared an enemy alien, and from there he went off to and he ended up that's how he ended up in Australia. And this is his marriage in 46. It's a year before we came to Australia. We came in the end of 47. We arrived in Australia. I went to state school for 1 year. In 49, the Jewish school was founded, Mount Scopus. I went to Mount Scopus. From there I went to end up in the youth movement, B'nai Akiva. Through B'nai Akiva I ended up, after getting married, having kids, and coming to Israel.
And George, can I ask, when you came to Australia, was your family helped by the Australian Jewish community that was there?
Not yet, but my father sponsored a lot of the Czech to come around. My uncle, my mother's sister, he sponsored them, and they had a group of Slovakian Jews, friends of my parents, and my father managed to sponsor and bring most of them out in 49. And they had a group.
The group was mainly survivors.
Till unfortunately most of them are gone already, but until the last day of their lives, they were a good.
And did they ever feel
like we are Australians here, or you South Africans, same sort of thing.
But did they ever feel themselves integrated with the Australian Jewish community? And that's a hard question.
Yeah. Later on, I think yes. Later on, yes, because they took part in the. They became members of the Liberal Party. My parents, although most Jews were Labour, but became members of the Liberal Party. They voted. They definitely did.
And Australia was good to your family.
Australia was fine. There was there was anti-Semitism, poor Visham, but nothing. Australia's a lovely country, a great country. I mean, I didn't leave Australia because.
And did you ever experience
because we're being persecuted or something, God forbid? No.
Did you ever experience any anti-Semitism growing up in Australia?
Sorry?
Did you personally experience any anti-Semitism growing up?
Personally, only once, when I was in state school. After that, I was in a Jewish school. State school, there were some kids who used to make fun of me, and I was in the second grade, they were in the sixth grade and something, so they came and tried to beat me up or something. Well, not beat me up, but they teased me, and they chased me, and until I got somebody in the 8th grade, one thing who, there were 2 Jewish kids, I don't know if you know, Izzy Liedler. Izzy was in that school, and I used to remember telling him, and he as an 8th grader came and they never touched me again. They never left me again. But he was on.
And George, can I ask, when you were in school, in the Jewish school, did any of your friends ask you about your experiences in the Shoah?
In fact, most of them were quite amazed when I started speaking, or when it came out. Because I told you during school I didn't speak about it. I didn't know about it. It's just something that came. I don't even know exactly. I know when exactly it came to me, what I spoke to you. But when it exactly came out and we started speaking about it in Australia, I don't remember. But I know once I did, there were a lot of my friends said, wow, I didn't know you were that. We didn't know you this, we didn't know you that.
George, can you show a few of the pictures from...
Okay, I just want to know that I have to go to Marib at 9 o'clock. So I just want to get there in time. What pictures you want to see? What do you want to see?
Of your parents or...
Okay. If my parents as they are, or now, or... Well, for instance, you've got there on that thing, that's my mother and my brother. Myself, my mother and my brother. But that's at the later stage. Okay, I'll show you here. When they got married in 39, my parents. The bottom one. My grandparents must be here somewhere. Just a second. Let's see if I get one of my grandparents.
And George, are you happy that you came to Israel?
Very much. I mean, I wanted to bring up my kids here. And I was probably brainwashed in the movement, but I was here also on a year on the Machon, on the Madhya Hutzlarts. So that also gave me a push. No, but I had one here before. I can hear. There you go. There you go. My grandparents, my mother's parents.
It's amazing that these pictures survived.
Yeah. My brother found them. He spent 5 years on putting this through. This is only the second part. There's a big part there. He started from 10, 14 or something right to now. You've got pictures and stories. Unbelievable.
It is amazing.
Right. That's there. That was at when they were young and pretty. That's my grandfather sort of during the war, really. That's how he looked. That's the one who survived. He survived the war, only 2 months later, 6 months later or something, to die of a heart attack while he was milking a cow.
That's so sad.
That's it. They got through all that.
I mean,
those days they didn't know what to do with heart attack. They couldn't. There was nothing. Didn't know how to treat it. I don't know if you see this, but this is my mother, her grandmother, and thing in Venice.
That's when they went on
the holiday in Venice.
These are amazing photographs.
So that's about. I think they got it all. Wait a minute. Yeah, this is the last thing. Family photo of my mother. My mother's, the 2 grandmothers, my mother's parents, and her 3 sisters. Not her 2 sisters, actually. She's the third.
That's from 1937.
19. Yeah, that's right.
It's amazing.
Okay. That's about right.
George, if I can ask you, what message do you impart to your family and to future generations?
I don't. I mean, I came to live in Israel. I believe we should be living. This is the place where we should be living. And I didn't come here because I had to come here. I came here because I wanted to.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up my children. And if you see any of my children, and they will tell you, I mean, they themselves have come to me and said, thank you for coming to Israel. You know, because they would not, there was a time when we came and things weren't too good and saying, and I used to sort of jokingly say, we're going back to, I didn't really mean it, but I said it, we're going back to Australia. And my kids straight away said, you can go back when we're staying here. I mean, and that's what I wanted. I wanted my kids to know that this is the place. And for better or for worse. Although at the moment it seems worse.
I just want to thank you because I'm so incredibly grateful. So, George, for me, it's been a tremendous honor and a privilege to be with you. That really has, and
I don't know why you're making a big deal out of it.
It's an amazing, really, your story is just these miracles.
There's all sorts of things.
Your parents were unbelievable,
My parents.
and your whole family, and that you survived and you're here.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
That's nothing to what others have survived.
I know, but you should just have Mazel Brocha and all of Hashem's blessings, and thank you so very much.
It's a pleasure.
I'm extremely grateful.
Yeah, but when you think of other families, like one just passed away, she was also in Pressburg and also in Australia, Martha Wise, what they went through, she and her sister. Yeah.
George, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.